Let's review the rules for formatting your works cited using the MLA Guidelines 8th edition. First, we'll cover the general rules, and then we'll talk about how you should use alphabetization to make sure that all the entries are in the correct order. We want to make sure that our works cited page is on a separate page. So insert a page break, or at the very least make sure that your works cited starts at the very top of a separate page. If there's only one entry in your works cited, then you can chop off the S and just call it works cited. And you should also make sure that you keep your last name and page number at the very top of the page in the header on the right side, and that just continues from the other pages. Next thing, we want to make sure that everything is double spaced, actually in your whole essay, but certainly also in the works cited. So make sure that you highlight your text, and you can highlight everything with Control A, go to spacing, and make it 2.0. Sometimes you may need to also remove an extra space after a paragraph in order to make sure that everything is spaced properly. Okay. Now, one thing that you should watch out for is hanging indentation, which means that for each entry, any line after the first is indented a tab space. So if there's another line after this, let's say that we kept going here, right, this would be indented there as well. One thing you will notice in Microsoft Word, if you're using it, is that sometimes if you keep typing past the end of the line, so if you keep typing here and you want to indent this, it may not actually work. You may press tab, oh, look what it did. It indented everything, and we don't want that. If that happens, just press Control Z. That will first of all undo what you've just done. Then press Enter, and now you can press tab, and now Word is recognizing that this is indeed a separate line. So we'll just fix this for a moment, but that's how you would do hanging indentation. Just keep typing your whole entry and then figure out where the new line starts, press enter if necessary, and then a tab space. Now what will happen sometimes, again, if you do press enter, is it creates more spacing than you need. It actually does more than just double spacing. So if that happens, again, go back, highlight everything, and go to spacing options and remove extra spacing before or after a paragraph. Okay, so that's something to be aware of. I've talked about spacing. I should again repeat that the font should also stay the same. No necessity of bolding the word works cited, let's say. Just keep the font the same, usually Times New Roman, size 12, and it's the same here as for the rest of the paper. Okay, so that's it for general formatting. Let's talk next about alphabetization, which is quite a mouthful. As we look at these different entries, they have been alphabetized by and large by the name of the author. So we start here with C, that's our first entry, and we go all the way to Smithy at the very end. So those are all our entries, C to S, but of course we could have more range as well. When we look at this, Carl Herbert Comte, you can see that the author's name is inverted. So we go by last name first, and then we ignore any kind of spaces in a name or symbols, right? So a space in a name would be something like Van Dyke, like my name. Symbols are ignored, punctuation is ignored. So really just look at the name itself. The next thing we do is if we have multiple names that kind of start the same or are quite similar, like Billy Smith, Zed Smith, and Andy Smithy, then what we do is we first look at everything before the comma. In other words, we treat the name before the comma as a unit. And if you look at this, then you can see that if you didn't do that, then Zed Smith would come after Smithy, right? Because it would be Smith, Z, and Z comes after Y. But because we treat everything before the comma first as a unit, we're going to place Smithy after Smith in this case. Hopefully that makes some sense. Next thing we can mention is that if you have multiple items or works from the same author, then you can use 3 hyphens followed by a period typically, and then the entry. But it may also occur that the particular author has a role to play, is a kind of contributor, and then you can place a comma and follow that up with the kind of title of whatever the contributor role is. Often that will be editor, but it can be something else as well. Now, as you alphabetize, that contributor word should not be included in the alphabetization. So we're going to ignore the word editor here in terms of the alphabetization. It can also happen that we have multiple authors co-publishing something together. So in this example, we have Andy Smith and Boris Blackjack, and you'll notice that Blackjack should actually come before Smithy. I guess I said Smith before, but it's Smithy. But what happens is that in order to alphabetize or organize multiple authors who have co-authored something, we actually look at how they are presented on the publication itself. So it can happen that somebody does way more work than somebody else, and that's why they receive more attention, more credit. So in this case, we're not doing it by alphabet, we're doing it by whoever's given most importance. Okay, and it can also happen that somebody co-authors with multiple people, of course, and then we organize them in that order, the same name again, and then with the second person, and we alphabetize in this case by the second person, because that's the next thing that we go with. Should it happen, however, that in the other publication, this particular author gets less of the credit and is mentioned second or third, then we have to follow that order as well. Okay, so we may have to make some changes in that case. And then the last thing to note is how you deal with works that have no author. So it can happen that there's no author, and what you should do then is use the title next as the next thing you can use for alphabetization. And ignore any articles, so those would be the, un, and and you can also, if there are numerals in a title, you can actually just kind of spell them out for yourself to figure out how you should alphabetize them. So in this case, 40 starts with an F, and so we have alphabetized this entry under F. Hopefully that helps you figure out your works cited. Most of the cases we've talked about are fairly rare in terms of alphabetization, but it's good to be aware of the rules.